The Y Factor is proudly brought to you by Flames Steakhouse Pizza and Ribs in Campsie, the best steak you'll ever have.
The Y Factor.
Hey Jamil, where can you get the best steak and ribs?
At Flames.
Have they got any deals on?
Yeah, mate. Specials on Thursdays, pizza and pastas, only $10.
$10?
Yeah, $10. $10. And 20% off everything else.
Only on Thursdays and Sundays.
Where at?
At Flames.
396 Beamish Street, Campsie.
Be there.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all.
Sunrise warms the horizon, sand dunes form in the distance. He's up and out in an instant. The crowd, they all were waiting, watching and anticipating. A man appears from afar. Could it be the one sent by Allah? He shouts, here comes the prophet. His face is a light that draws out the darkness. Words are alive, his message is living, pure everywhere. Our voices are singing. طلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا لا دعا لله داع.
The Facebook page is buzzing with activity. People log themselves off with great difficulty. But the real question we're dying to know is, does anyone actually listen to the show? Or are you all just in it for the cat contests, the heated debates and subsequent friend requests? Either way, the Facebook group is alive and well. Now momentarily snap out of Zuckerberg's spell. Stop taking photos of cute little creatures and start listening to the Y Factor's awesome features.
Well, the wise one has spoken. We've got Zeynab Gamieldien joining us today. Welcome to the show, Zeynab.
Thank you, Tasneem.
So your awesome poem that you put together in honour of the Y Factor show, not the Y Factor Facebook page, has earned you the status this week to actually co-host. Now, I hope you realise what an honour this is. You beat thousands to the queue, Zeynab. How do you feel at the moment?
I feel great. I'd like to thank my parents and Tasneem for this great opportunity.
All right, inshallah. As I said, listeners, you've had the opportunity to veto any of our co-hosts if you don't like them. Apparently, you guys all really liked Yusra because I didn't receive any complaints. So we're going to trial out Zeynab this week and see how she goes. You're listening to another episode of The Y Factor. Today is Thursday, the 12th of April. You've got Tasneem here on the mic, joined by Zeynab, as we said previously. Now, inshallah, this week we're really excited. Actually, I don't know if excited is the right word. Like, we're really... Zeynab, help. Honoured,
yes.
Because one of our guests is a very, very special person. Sister Dzenita will be joining us as we mark the 20th anniversary of the Sarajevo siege and the war in Bosnia. So we're really, really honoured to have her here. She was actually a survivor of the war, and she speaks about her war experience, what she had to go through, what she learned, and I think there's a lot to learn from that. I mean, just interviewing her at the studio, I got goosebumps because you think, subhanAllah, like the stuff these people have to go through, and here we are, complaining that not enough people like our status, or just stupid things like that. So that's that. We'll also be taking you through the best ice cream and halal eateries, since we've got our good old food blogger here, so we might as well utilise her. And as usual, we'll have our events events at the end of the episode. So without further ado, we'll just leave it there, inshallah, and we'll start with the news for this week.
The Y Factor.
An inquest into the disappearance of Sydney toddler Rahma Al-Danawi is taking place at the moment. Now, I don't know who remembers this. I certainly do at the time, because it was very tragic. Rahma was 20 months old when she disappeared from her Lernia home that she shared with 4 of her sisters, I think, at the time, and nothing was ever heard from her again. And so a coronial inquest into the disappearance and possible death of Rahma is occurring at the moment. And her 10-year-old sister is speaking at the moment at the inquest. The sister was 3 years old at the time when Rahma disappeared, and she said at the inquest that she saw a thief with long hair coming up to his shoulders, and at the time their parents thought it was just a bad dream, but now this could be a possible clue into the disappearance of Rahma.
That's right. She said the then 3-year-old said, I was awake and I saw the thief, but he didn't take me. He had long hair up to his shoulders, but he had no arms. Now, interestingly, what she also said was the girl's mother, her name is Alia, told the inquest that her daughter was talking about her husband's cousin Jamal Elmer, who frequently visited the house. Now, Mr. Jamal is actually expected to appear at the inquest in the coming days to actually see, this reference, because she actually mentions Jamal by name a couple of times. It's actually really horrific, the fact that this young girl is claiming that it was a dream, but it actually might be, as you said, the evidence towards. I mean, this has been going on since 2005, so it's dragged on for a really long time. And I don't know, I just imagine the pain that the mother would be going through. It's just horrendous.
It's horrible because all that happened was in the morning they found that Rahma wasn't there, and there was a hole in the fly screen.
Yep.
And it looked like it had been cut or torn. So anything could have happened to Rahma. She could have walked off, she could have been abducted. There are so many possibilities, and they are all terrible possibilities for Rahma's parents, who are Muslims.
The Y Factor.
Our new Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Carr, or as my dad likes to call him, Mr. Sayara, actually has pledged $5 million in aid for Syria. He said that Australia will contribute a further $5 million to meet the humanitarian needs in Syria as government troops continue their assault on rebels, defying a ceasefire agreement brokered by the United Nations. Foreign Affairs Minister Bob Carr made the announcement after a meeting with the United Nations Secretary General on Tuesday, and he said the humanitarian assistance will include $3 million for food assistance through the World Food Programme and $2 million for the United Nations Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Amid the ongoing violence, Australia will continue to help alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people, Mr. Carr said. And Australia already imposes sanctions against members of the Syrian regime involved in violence and repression. And I think even the RBA has actually released their names, and they've got their funds frozen at the moment. But this talk of Syria comes amid the caution that was issued by the United Nations for the ceasefire. The deadline's coming up and Syria hasn't even done anything about it. The international community has just faced this brick wall, you can say, Zeynab. What do you think? I think the situation...
Because there are so many sanctions imposed upon Syria at the moment. The funds of all the government, the major figures in the government, are frozen, and yet the violence continues. So the international community faces the question, what can we actually do for Syria? All this aid is being channeled, and yet the violence continues.
Not just that, but even in the news recently, there was talk of, Iran having a strategic role to play in these negotiations, especially seeing its role in the region and its aid to Syria. So I think in the next couple of days we should really keep an eye out on the developments in Syria, because they can actually make or break a situation that's been around over a year. It's just become really, really horrendous and disgusting. The death toll is just rising exponentially, and you honestly think, when's this going to end?
The Y Factor. The Y Factor.
The European Court of Human Rights ruled on Tuesday that Britain could legally extradite 5 suspects wanted in the United States on terrorism charges, including Abu Hamza al-Masri, an inflammatory Egyptian-born cleric incarcerated in Britain but accused in a range of anti-American plots that date back 14 years. So this is a major precedent that's being set here, because it's going to ease the extradition of Britain's terrorism suspects. And this is an issue that has surfaced repeatedly over the last decade, because the court ruled that the human rights of the defendants will not be violated by their prospective captivity in a maximum security American prison. And these suspects face the possibility of life sentences without parole. And so this is a big defeat for human rights advocates and legal experts. Some of them are calling this stunning, considering the court's history of wariness towards human rights standards of the American justice system.
It's actually interesting, because this is a European Court of Human Rights decision, and it's in relation to suspects that are potentially affected in a number of countries, because you've got them not just in America and the UK, but a number of countries actually have held terror suspects. So the fact that all face a possibility of life without parole, and this is not held in breach of their human rights. I don't know. I think in this heightened, post 9/11 climate of, terrorism and the threat of terrorism, it feels like civil liberties and human rights, which were, once the hallmark and beacon of, Western society, especially in relation to the human rights system, has just faded away.
The Y Factor.
As if it wasn't enough for the land to be stolen from the Palestinian people in Palestine, IDF soldiers have actually been suspected of stealing Palestinian gold in the West Bank. Investigations begin after the head of the household, Atta Shatawi, submitted a complaint to the civil administration, and the military police is investigating allegations that soldiers stole pieces of gold worth tens of thousands of shekels from the home of a Palestinian man during a late-night raid in the West Bank village last week. And the investigation began after the head of the household, Atta, submitted the complaint to the civil administration. He also told Haaretz on Tuesday that the incident began at 2:15 a.m. on Thursday when he opened the door to two Israeli soldiers who entered, handcuffed him and his son Sabri, who was 21. And shortly after, the soldiers released him and told him to take his wife and the other children out of the house, which he did. And subsequently, they actually stole the gold.
This is almost laughable in how atrocious it actually is, because as you said, not only is their land being usurped, but also their personal possessions, their gold is being taken by IDF soldiers. And it's laughable because the IDF claims to be this force of morality in the Middle Eastern region.
The only democracy that reigns.
Yes, you hear that line from them all the time, and yet repeatedly we've seen actions on the part of their soldiers which completely contradict their statements.
The civil administration, do you reckon that's the Palestinian civil administration or the Israeli? Because it doesn't specify in the article. It just says that the complaint was submitted to the civil administration. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's being investigated by the military police, but you know what, honestly, the actions of the IDF soldiers have been rampantly publicized everywhere. I mean, just read the articles about it, watch the YouTube clips. I mean, stealing gold is probably the least of their, horrendous crimes. The other stuff they've done, well, they're what did you say, Zeynab? The soldiers of
the force of morality
in the Middle East,
as they call themselves.
The Y Factor.
The latest news from North Korea is that Pyongyang has begun fueling rocket for a planned launch. So North Korea has begun fueling a rocket ahead of a planned launch expected later this week, which it says will put a satellite into space. So the head of the Satellite Control Center of the Korean Committee of Space Technology announced the latest preparations on Wednesday as the US and Japan called on Pyongyang not to go ahead with the launch. But it doesn't seem that North Korea is heeding this advice because
they said we're injecting fuel as we speak. It has started. It's pretty funny. Yeah.
So North Korea is continuing with its isolationist policies, it seems.
I mean, Hillary Clinton came out, she's actually the US Secretary of State. She urged North Korea not to go ahead with a planned rocket launch if it wanted a peaceful, better future for its people. And she said, "We are consulting closely in capitals and at the United Nations in New York, and we will be pursuing appropriate action."
Appropriate action, that sounds quite ominous, doesn't it?
But no,
North Korea?
It gets better. If North Korea wants a peaceful, better future for its people, it should not conduct another launch that would be a direct threat to the regional security.
Well,
she said,
if they do go ahead with the launch, let's wait and see what that appropriate action will be from the Americans.
This Uncle Sam flexing muscle in every region it sees fit is just getting infuriating. That word. Honestly, it's just become, just statements after statements issued by the administration as if they own the world.
Because in reality, who is the USA to tell North Korea not to go ahead with a rocket launch? North Korea is a sovereign state. It has the right to conduct itself as it wills. The USA certainly does.
Are you advocating for North Korea to have nuclear arms? I mean, it's interesting, even the hypocrisy. Israel has a right to have the nuclear weapons because it has to defend itself. But then, Iran and any other country can't. I just don't like the, double standards when you are against nuclear developments, then you're blankly against them. You don't make exceptions, especially to governments that are so questionable, such as, Israel and the like. We'll see how, things progress in that region.
The Y Factor.
In positive news, glioblastoma, forgive my pronunciation, brain tumour patients are hopeful after clinical trials show encouraging results, because a clinical trial is currently underway in the US to find a treatment for the most aggressive form of brain tumour. So patients with this type of tumour usually die within 5 to 9 months. But while there are still years of testing to be done, early results with the experimental vaccine are encouraging.
Well, Zeynab, it's interesting you say that, because recently this whole issue of, drugs, especially vaccines and stuff, have actually been, questioned by many in the medical field. And a recent study has actually showed that the swine flu drug may actually not be any better than aspirin. The pharmaceutical companies should make full data from their clinical trials publicly available, so the risks and benefits of the drug can independently analyze. Researchers have actually asked, because they said that on a number of cases in which this data was actually available, it actually radically changed public knowledge of the safety and the safety of these drugs, especially in relation to the swine flu. Professor Chris said it's insufficient evidence that is it called the Tamiflu, stockpiled by the Australian government in 2009 to quarantine swine flu, had actually any preventative effects.
It's interesting because the more vaccines that are discovered by scientists, the more the anti-vaccine movement seems to grow. I mean, in Australia, we have quite a strong anti-vaccination presence, and you just wonder, are they loony bins, the people who are anti-vaccine, or do they actually have something to their arguments? Because some vaccines are actually being found to not be effective later on.
Especially, I know, for example, in high schools when you have to get the cervical cancer, the tetanus shots and things like that. That versus, for example, the yearly the flu vaccine that comes out. And it's interesting, people vaccinating and still getting the flu, and people, being against the vaccines because they reckon it just gets them sick. I don't know. You just don't know what to believe anymore these days. To flu or not to flu, that is the question.
The Y Factor.
Another good news piece here. Australian Muslims from the state of New South Wales are relieved after the state government allotted land for thousands of new graves inside Australia's largest cemetery.
Sorry, just before you go on. I thought, you said relieved because we're going to get some, new funding, or we've just discovered some awesome thing and you're giving us more grave plots. So anyway, those who are planning to die, go on. Yeah.
Perhaps it was a bit misleading for me to call it good news, but we do need burial plots, and so it is actually good news that they're increasing the amount allotted to the Muslim community. So the 3.3 hectare site, the last major portion of land left inside Rookwood, will be split evenly between the Muslim and Jewish communities to address their shrinking cemetery space and to meet their burial needs beyond the next decade. Because you can laugh all you want, it is good news, because it's quite a scary notion to think that there wouldn't be enough graves. They were actually thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were thinking of burying the people on top of each other in a sort of bunk bed scheme
style. Yeah, so, I mean, the chairman of Rickwood's Muslim Cemetery Trust, Zeynab Gamieldien, said that for the last 30-40 years, frankly, we've been living or burying our dead on handouts. So it's interesting, inshallah, to see if these 6,000 spots are actually given to the Muslim community, to see how it will actually ensue. And that's also in talks amid, the golf club next to Rickwood Cemetery. Apparently, the business is not going really well, so they're actually looking at leasing some of its ground to Rookwood in the next couple of years. And that was kind of circulating in the news because the shareholders were going hoo-ha about, making the golf club become a necropolis. But interesting.
The Y Factor.
Now, this is for the ladies and perhaps the men as well. Online shopping. I know I'm guilty of this, but shop owners are fighting back. So shop owners are sick of people scoping their stores to use information to buy cheaper products online. And so now some retailers are charging people to try on shoes and clothing.
What?
So you might find that I've heard of camera shops doing this, for example, because when you think about it, it actually does take quite a lot of time for them to show you a product and to explain the usage of the product and its features. And so imagine they spend...
So you check it out and then you go online and find a cheaper version.
Yeah,
and then
exactly. After having used their expertise and their explanations to come to a decision as to what to buy. But then you never actually had the intention of buying it from that shop.
Well, apparently the Australian Retailers Association Executive Director Russell Zimmerman said that it's actually a decision for each retailer to make, and they're certainly at liberty to do this, and there's no rule stopping you, and that's in relation to them charging you for fitting and things like that. And he said that retailers were hurting from high unemployment rates such as weekend penalty rates, expensive rent in shopping malls, and the GST exemption on overseas purchases for up to $1,000.
So many people nowadays are doing all their shopping online pretty much for clothes, especially for technology, because it's quite expensive here in Australia compared to overseas. And so retailers are really feeling the pain of this desire of shoppers to go online.
Yeah, some of the online shops actually have those virtual mannequins and stuff, so you can actually like coordinate the whole outfit online, see if the colours match, and just send it through. I mean, I guess I know where the retailers are coming from. But from another side, is it inevitable? It's like, for example, when ebooks came out and like Borders and Angus and Robertson and stuff all went hoo-ha about it. But changes with technology, especially as the Australian dollar goes up, are they really inevitable,
Yeah, well, the same thing happened with video hire shops. Nobody hires DVDs anymore.
I know. Last time I drove past Civic, I'm like, how the hell are they still surviving? It's really... Well, speaking of the online world, we've got 3 more really... I don't know if they're funny, but weird online stories coming up. This lady in America, Jessica Vega, who was 25... was actually indicted on charges of fraud and grand larceny for getting her dream wedding by falsely claiming that she was actually dying of leukemia. Now, this lady, Jessica, she actually pretended to have this terminal illness, and she took advantage of the community's hearts and minds and profited off their generosity. They bought her this, embroidered dress. Yeah, and paid for all this stuff. And then they realised that she's actually, the whole thing was a hoax and it was a lie. So she actually pleaded not guilty, and a call to the legal aid firm that represented her was not immediately returned. However, the US State Attorney General's office announced that she was actually being indicted on these charges of fraud and grand larceny.
It's interesting. I mean, what she did was morally despicable, but I didn't realise that it was a crime to actually claim that you have some kind of disease to get people's sympathy.
Well, the silver lining in this story that I'm looking at is, you know how sometimes we always think, the world's reaching its end, no one cares about anyone anymore, blah, blah, blah. But people actually do care. So, like, the fact that she, they care about people with terminal illnesses and they actually bought her dress and stuff. Like, it's cute.
But it's sad now because with every fraud and hoaxer, there's going to be a genuine person, and it makes it harder for genuine people
for both sides.
To get help.
Exactly.
Because people, after this type of experience, will become a lot more cynical and a lot less likely to offer their assistance.
That's right.
The Y Factor.
Well, speaking of wackos online, Zeynab, a Melbourne man who published photographs of his baby with a gun has actually avoided jail over a string of offences. The St Albans man, Adam, I'm not going to pronounce his last name, it's really long, who was 29, pleaded guilty to the county court to possessing explosive guns and drugs. The court heard 65 grams of explosives were found in his fridge, along with 2 electronic detonators to him. On his arrest, photos of his baby daughter posing with a gun were uncovered on the Facebook site. He was actually handed a 12-month jail term, which was wholly suspended and ordered to pay to carry out 100 hours of community work. Okay, this is a really tragic story because it was a baby, a baby girl holding a gun. But why would you put explosives in the fridge?
I don't know. Maybe to keep them fresh. Maybe guns work the same way food does. Who knows?
To our listeners out there, if you know why guns should be kept in fridges, let us know. But I mean, I don't know if the baby, it doesn't say the age of the baby, but imagine it was like a toddler or something and he went to the fridge to grab food and then it like bites on the bullet.
Well, this reminds me of a case that happened in Melbourne recently, which is a lot less funny and a lot more tragic, where a father actually put as his Facebook status, "Gonna go kill my kid," and he was actually of Turkish Australian Muslim background, and he actually went and killed his toddler daughter because of a custody dispute with his de facto partner. And so you see that Facebook, sometimes people do wacky things, but sometimes they ought to be taken seriously.
That's honestly no comment. Speaking of crazy Facebook, our last news piece for this week is a principal is actually considering legal action against a group of former students and 2 parents, alleging that they have defamed her on an online hate page.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've heard of online bullying of students, but then this is the other way around where it's actually bullying a school principal. So, but I mean, why not? Because you can see it happening a lot these days. I've seen hate pages against teachers on Facebook, and it was bound to happen.
Well, in October, the Teachers' Appeal Board ruled a decision to permanently transfer her and was just and unreasonable, but its final decision to the board said that she won't be reinstated. And this all came as a result of the parents of 2 Cuba Petty students and a former student of Gepps Cross Girls High School, she was the principal of between 2005 and 2009. Interesting. So kids out there, if you've had enough of... No, I'm not going to advocate that. All right, that brings us to the end of the news segment for this week. Let us know your thoughts on these articles that we did discuss, inshallah. We'll be taking a short break. Stay tuned straight after the break because we will be hearing from the amazing sister Dzenita in relation to her experience growing up in Bosnia during the war. You're listening to The Y Factor on 87.6 FM.
The Y Factor.
Oh, mountains of Mecca, what can you say of the day that Abraham passed your way? And he was instructed by God to build a house of peace where people will pray, and they will come on every lean camel and out of every ravine for the purpose of praising Allah, to glorify Allah. Oh, mountains of Mecca, what can you tell of the day that stones from the sky fell, destroying an army determined to break the house of Allah that Abraham built? Oh, mountains of Mecca, how was the dawn on the day that my prophet Muhammad was born? How did it feel knowing he was to be the last and most beloved of all, Rasul of Allah, Nabi of Allah? Oh, mountains.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of the Bosnian genocide, which occurred between April 1992 and December 1995. It was Europe's worst massacre since the Holocaust, and the siege of Sarajevo was the longest one to occur in modern history. The 20th anniversary gives rise to the chance to reflect upon this atrocity committed against our Muslim brothers and sisters in Bosnia.
To reflect upon this occasion, we have Sister Dzenita joining us in the studio, and we're highly honoured. Sister Dzenita is actually one of the survivors of the Sarajevo siege. Welcome to the show, Sister.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to all the listeners.
So, Sister Dzenita, you actually grew up during the siege of Sarajevo and the war. What was it like?
That is right, yes. When the war started, I was just finishing my primary school and I was getting ready to start high school. So I was pretty much 14 years old when the war started.
So you were actually born in Sarajevo?
I was born in Sarajevo, yes, and lived throughout the whole war while being in Sarajevo.
Sister, what was life like before the war began?
Look, it was a beautiful country. The former Yugoslavia was a very beautiful country, very democratic. 3 main entities, Catholics, Christians and Muslims, but people lived in harmony. And no one expected the war, especially young people, because when you are so young, being 14 years old, you basically just expect to move on with your life and to plan how you are going to spend your teenagehood and everything. So it was pretty normal. And I must say it caught quite a lot of people by surprise, because it obviously was planned behind the scenes, but I think that the citizens didn't have a clue that it was going to break out. Yeah, it was pretty shocking, because I think the lay people or the citizens didn't really expect that there was going to be war, but I'm sure that politicians had it at the back of their mind.
Before the war began, it seemed like there was a lot of coexistence between the Christian and Muslim communities in Bosnia. So did it come as a great shock to you when those tensions started to come to rise?
It definitely did, because, as I said, it caught a lot of people by surprise. I remember my parents were, for example, working with people who were Christians or Catholics, and suddenly they had all these colleagues turning against them, like they were neighbors turning against neighbors. And as I said, it was pretty shocking, because it was just unexpected and something you wouldn't think that the next door neighbor would do to you or your friend or your colleague. So I think we all lived for the first 2 years of the war in a shock, thinking, where has this come from?
So when the war eventually did start, what were the conditions like during the war?
Pretty bad, I must say. Every day it's a matter of survival. For example, I remember I managed to finalize my primary school, and then I managed to enroll into a high school. But we had very poor conditions, because the schools were bombarded, so there was no proper conditions where you could actually attend the school, and it wasn't safe. So we ended up having classes in basements of the buildings or basements of the houses, and we didn't have electricity for 4 years. Sometimes they would actually switch on electricity, and it was for safety reasons that we didn't have electricity, because if you light up the city, if you have the electricity, then you become the target. So I understand why we didn't have it, but of course that meant that the conditions, living conditions, were very poor. Then we also didn't have a regular supply of water, which meant that we had to go to certain places to actually get water into canisters. We were, sometimes I remember I was going with my mom, sometimes 4 or 6 kilometers to a place to just get some drinking water, or to even bring some water to wash our clothes. Winter, look, Bosnia is a country with very strong winters. The temperature can get up to minus 27. That's how bad it is. And you can just imagine what it was like in winter. We soon ended up having no supply of wood, because everyone was actually using wood, not only to heat up the houses, but also to cook in summer, because we didn't have electricity. So when the winter would come along, we wouldn't have enough wood to even keep us warm. So pretty much like taking into consideration all of that, and the fact that I think we survived in terms of food on only 4 main ingredients, which was, you would, for example, have only 200 mils of oil to last you a whole month, and then you would live off pasta, broad beans, and rice. Bosnians are not big eaters of rice, so we had to get used to the fact that we had to have plain rice for 4 years. And so coupling all of that with the fact that it was bombarding and shelling and kind of whizzing throughout the region, that's right, it was just very hard.
Were there many countries in the region, though, at that time who were willing to give Bosnia aid, especially some of the Muslim countries who had previously seen Europe, especially the Muslims in Europe, as a distant other? Did they actually come to the aid of the Bosnians at the time?
You are quite right. Because of our geographical location and because of the fact that Yugoslavia was a communist country for all those years, I think a lot of people didn't realize that there are actually a group of Muslims living in that area of the world. And Bosnia itself, at the moment, probably has just around 3 million residents, but not all of them are Muslims. So we are not talking about huge proportions of people being Muslims. Only about 30% of the Bosnian population.
The issue is, though, having a 250,000 death toll out of a very small minority in the population, or even a majority of the population, is still a huge number if you're comparing it in relation to the population of Bosnia at the time.
How did you personally cope during the war? Did you develop any survival mechanisms to cope?
I think in the first 2 years, I think I was shocked. I was just going through the period where I was coming up with my own survival strategies because you have to develop them on the go, thinking, how do I actually survive this, staying sane, without affecting my mental health, without affecting my physical health. And it is very difficult. So after 2 years, I think you are right, we all developed those we desensitized to the whole, to everything that was happening around us. It became normal, if I can say that. So we kind of knew what to expect every single day. Even though you are going through the survival mode, you know that every day there will be shelling. If there was no shelling, we thought there was something wrong.
It's so sad, though, to see that, as you're saying, shelling became the ordinary occurrence, because it seems every time there was shelling or there were bombs, hundreds went missing. On this 20th anniversary that we're marking, that very day 20 years ago, when the shells did hit the marketplace in Sarajevo, there was more than 100 killed and thousands wounded just in that one occurrence. It's so sad to hear.
Yeah, a very good friend of mine lost his father that day, and actually I was meant to go to that marketplace that morning with my mom, but I had a very bad dream that night, which was, subhanallah, probably a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to go. I had a very bad dream that something was going to happen, and my mom was nagging me to go to the marketplace, and I said to her, Mom, I'm having such a bad headache, we better stay back and wait. And so, within the moments of the morning, there was that huge massacre, bomb blast. And even now, when you go throughout Sarajevo and all other cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you still see the craters, like you still see the remnants of those bombings and shellings. It was awful. I think the fact that a human mind can actually do something like that is beyond comprehension, let alone living in it through every single day.
Just hearing the story, though, I'm just kind of shocked and bewildered to even think what was going through your mind at this time. In terms of the light, was there even a light at the end of the tunnel that you could see? It must have all been really, really bewildering at the time.
It is. But what I must say, I think the motivation was the fact that I was so young. And personally, I'm a very strong person, but I must say that I have probably developed being a strong person because of that experience. But it's a different feeling when you are in a war because people become closer. People help each other, people stand for each other, and you just go through it because you have no time to actually think about the luxuries. You have no time to put any conditions or set any conditions. You take every day as it comes along, and every day could be your last day. It's unbelievable how many times in the mosques our imams were saying, look after your deeds, make sure you do the right deeds because you can see the world that we are living in, because every day could be your last day.
So you must have been in high school when the war ended. What was that like? What was happening at the time?
I was just finishing high school, and 18.
When the war officially ended?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was, look, we were not even celebrating because you are just over everything. You are so exhausted from not having proper life conditions, from not having enough food. The economy is all destroyed. There is no prosperity. So yes, you are quite happy that the war has ended, that life can start becoming normal. But
you're living another world now.
Yeah, living another world. That's right. And for example, I went to Bosnia 3 months ago, and it's unbelievable. 20 years on, people are still struggling because everything was destroyed. The infrastructure, the economy, people are very distressed. A lot of them are going through major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Living conditions are still poor. So it's kind of the aftermath, thinking, what do I do now? How do I actually normalize my life after going through so much? Because every day we were going through so much. So it is very hard. I think it's very hard, whoever goes through the war situations.
When the war ended, were relationships between the Serbs and the Bosnian Muslims changed forever?
I can't really tell you. I can only tell you the observation from 3 months ago when I went to Bosnia, because as soon as the war ended, I left the country with my parents because we were so exhausted and our house was destroyed and basically we didn't have anything to live on. So we decided to leave the country. But like, as I said, 3 months ago when I visited Bosnia, unfortunately I noticed that things are coming back to the same stage they were before the war, which means people were very conscious when things were happening in the war. But I think through the external pressures, the pressures of the European Union and the pressures of the international world, I think people in that area have been actually asked to, try to normalize things as much as possible. But of course, there are still some areas where it's pretty unsafe to go, because Bosnia has now been divided. It's no longer Bosnia. You have Republic of Serbia, part of it. Then you have the part where only Bosnians live. And look, it didn't make me feel comfortable. But at the same time, it's very sad knowing that it was a one-piece country 20 years ago. Now it's still kind of one country, but it's divided into all these different entities. So it's not comfortable.
So when you did finally arrive in Australia, what was it like for you and your family to move on and leave these, very traumatic experiences behind you guys?
I must tell you, going through the war as a young person teaches you quite a lot. You mature overnight, basically. So coming to Australia was meant for me that there was no time to be wasted. I didn't care about what Australia was like as a country. All I cared about was that it was offering me and my family security and safety, and that we had normal living conditions. And I had clear set goals when I came to Australia. I said to myself, I'm going to achieve what I couldn't achieve in my country, which is education and feeling safe. And as we all know, Australia is a very welcoming country. A lot of people were welcoming us, and especially the Muslim communities. So it was a bit of a cultural shock for me, but look, it was a very good experience. And of course, to this date, people are very interested in stories about survival and what it means for me. I must say there is no day that passes in my life that I don't remember the war experiences. If I cook food, for example, I make sure I only cook enough. I make sure I don't spill the food. Yeah. If I drink water, I make sure I only fill in a half cup of the glass or half of the glass, in order not to spill the other half. So I think psychologically I'm so impacted that every single day of my life is lived in a way that I kind of take care of things, because I know what it's like not having them. I know what it's like not having a proper shower. I know what it's like not having water and all of that. And I also try to teach my children that modesty is the most important thing, that sometimes living in a country that offers you quite a lot can actually have its negative sides. If you are modest and if you are very humble in the way how you think what is enough for life, then I think you have better chances to go through life much stronger than if you have too high expectations. Because as I said, coming to Australia, I didn't have too high expectations. I came as an asylum seeker. We didn't even know if we were going to stay in the country because we applied for a visa within the country. And one goal for me was, I want to have my I want to achieve the goals that I wasn't able to.
Were there lasting emotional impacts from the war? Or did you find that you were able to forgive and forget after the horrible experiences that you'd had?
It's quite interesting you ask that question, because as a young person, I like young people because you simply do not have those ideas, negative ideas about the enemy. You know there is the enemy out there, but you are so innocent and pure that you don't want to think about them as the enemy. You know, there was no day that I was praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to actually forgive those people, to guide them onto the right path. However, as I grew older and more mature, and as I started learning a little bit about why the war erupted in Bosnia and Herzegovina and why everything happened, of course, it became more and more difficult for me to accept all those people. So, yes, to this date, I still have issues, for example, with dealing with people who are Serbian Christian or Catholics because I don't trust them. That's the bottom line. I cannot feel safe around them. I cannot trust them. I do have a number of acquaintances who are Serbian or Croatian. I have no problem dealing with anyone from whatever background. But, you know, there is always that feeling that you've been stung by those people and you always want to be careful. However, Australia, you know, I think they have a very good law in here. They actually do not allow people to go against each other. So in a way it's good because it helps people to adjust to the new country and to the new world, leaving things behind. Yes, because there is no, I think a lot of the problems that happened in the Balkan was constantly going back to what happened in the history. Yes. You have to let go because if you want to progress, if you want to move on, you have to let go of certain things. But look, of course, I can't forget and forgive, so it will always stay within.
What you've just described to us are some very harrowing and impactful experiences that you've had. Do you have any final concluding remarks to say to our listeners based on these experiences?
My advice is always be open if you do have issues. Be open, talk about the issues with your close ones, seek professional assistance, talk to people who are older, people who are wiser, people who have had life experience. Don't be shy. It's quite normal to go through difficulties in your life. However, you need assistance of other people if you are going to survive. And always think about what would your life be like if you were living somewhere else in the world where you do not have all the luxuries like they're offered in Australia. Just think about what your life would be like if you didn't have warm water in the morning to take a shower, or if you didn't have electricity to make a breakfast, if you had to go and chop wood to make your house warm, or if you had to travel 5 kilometers to get the water, drinking water, I mean. So I think it's good if you kind of have reality checks with yourselves every now and then, just to make sure that you are not flying too high, but that you are close to the earth, because the closer to the earth you are, the better chances of coping with any disappointments that you may have in your life, because life is full of temptations, subhanallah, and disappointments. So the more open mind you have about things, the easier it will be for you to go through the life, and less disappointed you will be, because life is not as good as we think it is.
Sister Dzenita, thank you so much for your words. Honestly, highly appreciated, and thank you for sharing the story with our listeners.
Thank you. All the very best.
Inshallah, we'll see you in the studio one more time. Thank you. Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum. Salam.
Sırın negriye Rishwani, I'm hungry.
Do you want to go for another Macca's run? Guys, get some proper food, man. Flame Steakhouse Pizza and Ribs in Campsie has specials on Thursdays and Fridays. You can get $10 pizzas, $10 pastas, and 20% off everything, man.
20% off?
Wow! And their food is awesome. It's the freshest you can get. They actually get quality food, man. This place is the bomb. And you have to book your places, otherwise it gets packed out like a madman.
Sounds amazing. What's the address?
You go to 396 Beamish Street in Campsie, and to book a place, you just check online at flamegourmet.com.au and call them on that number, and you can make a booking.
Wow, let's head there now, Rishwani.
Yeah!
So, since our awesome food blogger is here, let's talk about food, our favourite topic, Zeynab.
Oh, let's do it.
So, I was actually thinking to talk about ice cream first, but today's pretty cold, but maybe we can just mention ice cream really quickly, okay? So, if you had to give me your 3 top ice cream places, where would it be? Go.
Well, let me just start by saying that ice cream is great in any weather, as any ice cream lover knows.
Actually, you know what? You're right. You know when it's freezing cold and you sit in front of a heater and you dig into a tub of ice cream? Man, that's like
Yeah,
bliss.
nothing better, and especially the contrast between a cold ice cream and, say, for example, a hot fudge sauce.
Ooh.
That is bliss.
We know
let me
where we're
tell
going
you.
after the recording. Go on.
Well, okay, in terms of top 3 places in Sydney, that's a difficult question because there are so many good places. But one that immediately springs to mind is Cow on the Moon in Newtown. And that, for anybody who knows Newtown / Enmore, it's opposite the famous Fahim's restaurant.
Oh,
Pakistani
yum.
food, halal.
They have the best tandoori.
Amazing food. And so if you go to Fahim's, do not miss going to Cow on the Moon afterwards. It's right opposite. And it's also opposite another halal eatery, Sultan's Table. So their ice cream is amazing. And
Tell me 3 of the top flavours you've had there.
Well, their pistachio is great. They have this South American caramel one, which is amazing as well. And their hokey pokey has crunchy bits in it, and they are really, really good.
Yum. Okay, next, number 2.
Okay, number 2, I'd say, is Pure Gelato in Croydon.
Oh,
now
yeah, I've been there. I
That's
can vouch
less
for that.
of an ice cream eatery and more of an ice cream factory, which brings to mind Willy Wonka, doesn't it?
It does, and you've got tubs and you can buy like ice cream cakes and stuff. But they have the weirdest flavours. Like they have up to 200-300 flavours. They've got everything.
Yeah, everything you can think of, from Turkish delight to fig and honey. They have it all.
Snickers, like for
Peanut butter.
They have really weird ones too, like, you know those weird ones?
They have a lot of combinations, but basically they have something to suit every taste.
And you can still get like takeout if you don't want to buy a whole tub. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't. But if you go in, you can actually still get a cone. It's in Croydon, so just on, what's that long street called?
Oh, I don't know,
Belmore
but
Road or something?
it's in Croydon.
Just
Croydon's a small
Google
suburb.
Pure gelato.
They have a website, and so they have a list of all their, I think it's 152 flavours to be exact.
Oh.
So you can have a look at their flavours on their website, and you can customise, design an ice cream cake to your
Ooh.
liking. So
Let us know how you go, listeners. If anyone tries it, let us know your best flavour, and maybe it'll be good for advice for everybody else. All right, number 3.
Number 3, well, there's a new ice cream place that's opened in, the fancy Westfield in Pitt Street. I feel rich every time I eat there. Anyway, so they have an ice cream place called Via del Corso, which is Italian gelato, and their gelato is amazing. It's not particularly cheap. I think it's $7 for 2 scoops, but you're in a new Westfield shiny food court, so...
But $7 a West. You know the place opposite Brighton? What is it called? Ice Creamery or something? It's got lots of gelato flavours and stuff. That's like $7 for 2 scoops too. $7.50.
But we're cheap students here. I know all Y Factor listeners are cheap students
if you're
as well.
cheap, just go to Macca's, get the soft serve for 30 cents. We're talking about people who have saved up the whole semester to buy 1 ice cream cone. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. Count your pennies and you'll be able to afford 2 scoops of Via del Corso.
Sounds yum. Well,
Yeah.
all right. So we're doing it backwards. Usually people talk about main and then they go on to dessert, but I decided to start off with ice cream. So if you were going to tell me your top 3 restaurants and different cuisines, what would it be?
Oh, Tasneem, that's such a hard question. Stop with the top
we've only
3.
got 6 minutes and I also need to do the event. So chop chops, come on.
Stop with the top 3. Let's talk
It's sunnah.
conceptual
You know,
foods
like, the
here.
hadith, 3 dates and 3. I'll give you a whole episode where you can rant all you like, but top 3, yalla.
Top 3. Okay, well...
By the way, listeners, she's literally having a midlife crisis on here. I wish I could record her face.
This is an existential crisis for me to define food in such concrete terms. Well, okay, let's think.
All right, how about I make it easier for you? Not top 3, so they don't have to be like, first, second, and third. Give me 3 different cuisines and a best restaurant to eat them at.
Okay, well, since we are recording in Lakemba, let's talk Lebanese. And I don't think we can go past Al Asil for Lebanese food. Cheap,
No, get out of typical. People know
fresh.
typical stuff. Okay, how about that new place? It's called Mashawi, and they have like grills with like... Oh, we posted it on the Y Factor with their very inappropriate names, like they're all weapons and...
The Katusha burger, the chicken scud burger, it literally goes off with a bang.
So they've got like... in Arncliffe, they've got the... What's that shop called in Arncliffe? They've got the San Fran. So it's
Najee's.
Like, Najee's, right? So they've got those burgers that have like capsicum, corn and cheese in it. They've got that here too. That's the chicken scud and the beef scud.
Yeah, Najee's might be in for a copyright suit.
Really? For what?
For plagiarism of their burger.
So, for San Fran?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, we'll enjoy it while it lasts. So that's Lebanese. Number 2 is, how about if I wanted to have Yuga food?
Oh, well, that's another hard one because there are so many of them. Well, the one in Auburn opposite the station, I forget what it's called. None of them have particularly creative names. It's all just like Uyghur cuisine.
And they've got like fake grapes in the ceiling and like, what's his name? Nasruddin or something. You know that fictional character on the carpets around the walls?
With the camel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every single restaurant seems to have the fake grapes for some reason.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to get an Uyghur person on the radio to explain why that is. But the place in Albany is actually pretty good.
On Rawson Road?
Yes, on that main road opposite the station there. But it's very, let's say, humble. It's not exactly a place that...
Well, speaking of someone who eats in the posh streets of Pitt Street. Anyway, number 3, if I were to have Italian, what would the best Italian be?
Italian?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of halal food... Well, am I allowed to say anything other than the very delicious Flame Steakhouse?
Oh, they've opened up the new one in Bankstown too.
Yes.
Also, well, this is not really Italian, but you know that Impress Cafe in Auburn? They've got really nice wood-fired pizzas.
They do, and they have breakfast, Turkish breakfast, which is great.
The dips and the bread.
Sucuk, and they cook their eggs in these little fry pans and they serve it to you in it.
Yeah, it's really cute.
And
it's very alternative.
It's very authentic. And I think that's an upcoming area in halal cuisine, breakfast. I've heard of another place that does a really good...
Casbah?
Breakfast apparently. Oh, well, let's not get started on Casbah. But Wraps and Grills on Kelsey in Arncliffe apparently does a really great breakfast.
Oh my God, we're going there. Anyway, Zeynab, we're running out of time. We're going to leave a proper food segment for later in another show. But quickly, for the events that are coming up this week. So on Friday night, you have 2 events. You've got So Give Glad Tidings to the Strangers by UWS MSA, 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. Inshallah, it will be held at UWS Parramatta Campus, EAG 19, whatever that's supposed to mean, corner of Victoria Road and James Roos Drive. So give glad tidings to the strangers. So if you're interested, that's a UWS MSA event. Make sure you attend. Also Friday night we have...
The Happiness Compass, Returning the Self Towards Fitra, which features the very amazing international sheikhs, Sheikh Faraz Rabbani and Ustad Usama Cannon. And...
Local talent, Imam Afroz Ali and Sheikh Dr. Omar Abdullah.
And in a special new announcement, they are featuring Kamal Saleh,
as well
the
as
spoken word poet.
Wow. Well, that's 6:30 p.m. till 11 p.m. Inshallah, it will be held at the University of Western Sydney, Bankstown. UWS seems to be hitting up all the Muslim events. So UWS Bankstown, so be sure to attend, inshallah. That's 6:30 to 11 p.m. Registration is required. So make sure you go to www.happiness4wellness.com /pursue happiness. Yeah, pursue happiness. All right. So that's Friday night. On Saturday, we've got...
The Families for Children. This is a project by Mission of Hope.
We had Hanan Dover on the radio 2 weeks ago discussing this issue, so you should have remembered, all of you, the foster care project.
And it's a barbecue to inform people about the foster care project, and that will be happening on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Australian National Sports Club, which is on...
in Perry Park on
Punchbowl Road.
Punchbowl Road in Perry Park.
Right.
And finally, the final destination, the 5 phases of the afterlife, will be Sunday the 6th of May, 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Inshallah, it's going to have awesome Mashayikh, Dr. Muhammad Abdullah from Brisbane, Sheikh Bilal Asad, Sheikh Saidi Sulaiman Sulaiman, Abu Adnan and Sheikh Omar Al-Banna, as well as Sheikh Nazih Yafi, Nassar Zaud, Zahir Nabulsi and Muhammad Khudur. If you're interested, 9:30 to 1:30 p.m. at the Grand Westella Litcombe, $20. There's only 1,000 tickets, and from last event they were totally sold out. So if you're interested, they're selling him at Auburn Australian College of Arabic, Bankstown Al Firdaus College, Lakemba Pharmacy for Less, Liverpool GIYC and Regents Park IDCA. You can also buy them online at www.allthingsislam.com.au. Now, I said that all with one breath because we've reached the end of the episode. We need to leave it there. Zeynab, thank you so much for joining us on the episode this week. Highly appreciated. Our listeners, unless you vote her off, we're going to have her on. So thank you so much once again. You're listening to The Y Factor on 87.6 FM.